Behind those cozy nights at home, thousands of employees at BP go to work every day. People producing more U.S. natural gas. People building grid-scale solar capacity. People turning landfill waste gas into pipeline-quality renewable natural gas. And people delivering all of that power where it's needed. They're part of the more than 300,000 jobs BP supports across the country. Learn more at bp.com/investing in America.
This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. Thrilled today to be joined by a brilliant investor. We're joined by both a brilliant investor and a terrific leader. We're joined today by Javar Avery. And Javar is the president at Sun and Moon Capital. He's going to tell me whether I pronounced Avery correct or not. He's going to help me on that. But Javar, tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you do in Sun and Moon Capital.
Yeah, sure. And it's Avery. You almost got it right, Scott. You almost got it right, but I won't hold it against you. The last name is Avery. But, you know, ultimately, Scott, I always like to say it, I'm just a guy, right? But by title, as you said, I'm the chairman and CEO of Sun and Moon Capital. And we're a team of operating executives with about 30 plus year experience in growing and managing companies. And what we do, Scott, is we invest around a theme that we titled the Underserved capital markets, right? And this includes business enterprises that are both minority and non-minority owned that have between 1 to 2 million in EBITDA, right? Which we call the micro market space. And so that's our theme, a little bit about me.
And so the $1 to $2 million in EBITDA businesses, those are serious businesses, though, because somebody put a lot of effort in to get to that spot. Tell us a little bit about what that sort of looks like and if there's specific verticals or industries that you're interested in, because that's, you know, nobody gets to $1 million, $2 million without putting real work in it. You know, most of the bigger investors might view it as too fragile still, but talk a bit about what those businesses look and feel like.
Yeah, no. So typically, I mean, you're spot on, right? You can't get to that level without some work. And typically it's really family founded, right? It started with a mom or a dad and, you know, maybe they passed it on, maybe they didn't. But, you know, the nature of those businesses are somewhat similar to the bigger firms, right? But maybe they just don't have the knowledge base that some of those larger firms have. Maybe they just don't have the access to the liquidity that those larger firms have. And so what we notice about those businesses is that, hey, you know, they're great companies. They're at this inflection point, and that's where we come in and be a value add. And so they actually have some of the similar fundamentals, if you will, as some of these larger companies. It's just that the larger players in the space, the bigger private equity folks, you know, they choose not to venture down in that market for a number of reasons, right? But yeah, I mean, they have some of the same fundamentals. You know, it's really family owned. It's really family founded. But, you know, there's room to grow. There's plenty of room to grow. And that's where we see the better opportunity that for us at Sun and Moon Capital.
Thank you. And I always think about companies as, on one hand, the execution product side, what they have on the execution side and the product side. And on the other hand, the sales and commercialization side. Is there any common theme as to where these companies at that level need to invest or stack resources? Or is it just constantly both, that they got to improve execution and performance as well as improving the sales side? But is there anything that ever sticks out at you, like they've been underserved on the sales side, they really got to build out a sales team? How do you think about those things?
Yeah. So first, I missed answering your question of what we kind of look for, your previous question, and to get back to that real quick. I mean, we kind of like those, you know, we call them mission critical, low capex service businesses. So I wanted to make sure I answered that.
Tell me about that, Javar. Please tell me about that. Give me an example of mission critical, low capital business.
Yeah. So for instance, we're in the process of, you know, hopefully cross our fingers, closing a company in the janitorial space, right? They clean airports, this company that we're working with. So think about that for a moment, right? That's a mission. It may be a commodity service, but it's a mission critical commodity service, especially for the airport. Why? Because the airport constantly has traffic.
Yes.
They constantly have people in there. So they need to have someone that can do it right, and that's responsible and accountable.
It's a labor business versus a capital business, meaning
that's right.
You don't need to invest a lot of equipment. I mean, some vacuum, some whatever you're buying, but it's not equipment worth millions of dollars. It's rather And there's probably some technology behind it, logistically getting people to the right spots, right people. But at the end of the day, it's more of a labor business, mission critical, low cap. Got it.
There
Fantastic
you go.
example. Thank you. Okay.
Spot on. Now, if you let me answer your second question real quick, I think you were asking, regarding to what's needed. So our focus, and you hit the nail on the head. When we come into a business, we look at the go-to-market strategy. That's our value add, right? So a lot of these companies, you hit the nail on the head. It's really go-to-market. We put a lot of energy on what's the go-to-market, what's the ICP, and that's where an individual like Evan, who we just brought on, I mean, he's just phenomenal in that regards of helping us get to the next level with the go-to-market and who's the right who are the right ICPs for this particular service offering. So that's the key for most of the time for us when we look at the business.
Give me a definition. What's an ICP? And I don't mean to be, stupid, but what's an ICP?
No, the ideal customer profile.
Yes. So the point being, many of these businesses have been built out of mom and pop businesses. The mom or the pop was the principal salesperson or the driver of the business. They've not built a broader sales team around them. Fair statement?
That's fair. You're exactly correct.
Got it. So trying to improve the go-to-market strategy, absolutely fascinating. And Javar, how long have you been doing this for? Give the audience some sense of how long you've been in this and how you got to this, because what a fascinating business.
Yeah, no. So I've been at it maybe 6 or 7 years, and it started with a small family-owned buyout of a coffee shop that I did in Hampton, Virginia. That's where it all started, and that probably was about 8 or 9 years ago now, maybe a little more, give or take. But it started there, and that's when I said, okay, these small companies, and we were able to improve that business and ultimately exit that business. But it was small, but it showed me that, hey, there are companies that are just like this size. That we can add value to, but can we do it at a different scale and on a different playing field? And that's kind of where Sun and Moon Capital came to life.
Fascinating. So a coffee shop making a couple $100,000 a year, somebody who's running it and owning it has a job. They've got a job. It's almost like running or owning a Subway. But it's not until they add to how they grow that or improve it that now they've improved the margins, they've improved what they're doing, they've expanded the service, they've grown it, that it becomes a bit of $400,000 to $800,000 business or whatever the number is.
That's right. You're trying to help them get to some form of a liquidity event, right? I mean, think about it. You're an entrepreneur. You spent your whole life doing this. Ultimately, you want to have a liquidity event, right? At some point. And unfortunately, in the middle market, right, space, you can't get that liquidity event till you reach 2 million EBITDA, 2.5, 3 million. What we said was, why can't they get it at 1? Why can't they get it at 1.5? And that's where we come in.
And at 1.5, they probably can with the right partner like you folks, because now there's enough of a business beyond the owner's salary to grow a business, to potentially invest and grow a business.
There you go.
Fascinating. So the title, Sun and Moon Capital. Give us a sense of where the title and the name comes from, Sun and Moon Capital.
Yeah, no, great question. So early investor of mine, when we were doing a coffee shop and I was in the middle of formalizing, putting together Sun and Moon Capital, he said, if I had a company, I would name it Sun and Moon Capital. So I'm not going to take the credit for the name. And I said, why? And I thought what he said was very interesting. He said, when you're doing a deal, right, the buyer doesn't exist without a seller. Seller doesn't exist without a buyer. We don't exist without our attorneys. Attorneys don't exist without us. There's so many things. And he was like, just like the sun and the moon, right? One doesn't exist without the other. And they have to learn how to coexist. He was like, that's the same thing in deals. And so when I look at a deal and we think about Sun and Moon Capital, we are always asking, how do we fit? How do we make everyone coexist to get a deal across the finish line? Because it's already an arduous task. And if someone is off, right, then that makes it harder. So how do we coexist with everyone to get a deal across the finish line? That's how and
I love that. And when I, at one point in my career, lived in the deal world, I always thought about it as getting the buyer aligned amongst the different buyer principles, getting the buyer and seller aligned together, and then getting all the things done that have to get a transaction done. So 3 different stages, and the Sun and Moon concept reflects that well, I think, is just brilliant. And Javar, where can people learn more about Sun and Moon Capital? And any advice that you would give to emerging business builders, to emerging founders? Any advice you'd give to people?
Yeah, so you can learn more about us, of course, sunmooncapital.com, right? I'm on LinkedIn, so I would say those two spots there. But look, as far as advice, I would say two things. Number one, you can't control the outcome, but you can control the output. So focus on putting out the best you can, right? At Sun and Moon Capital, we live and die by that. We can't control whether investors are going to say yes or no. We can't control whether the business owners are going to say. But when we put that IOI out there, when we put our decks out there, there's one thing that you can say is that, oh, these guys didn't put their best foot forward. So that's the first thing. And then lastly, I would just say, look, make the journey about everyone else, right? Shed the ego, right? Get rid of the ego. You'll have so much more fun on your journey if you take that approach. I mean, trust me, I know from experience. Just shed the ego, right? I mean, why are we in business anyway, right? To serve everyone else. I'm in business to serve the attorneys, to serve the investors, so shed the ego and don't worry about the outcome. Just focus on output.
I mean, the shedding the ego is so important. Every time I've been involved in a new business, we've had to get a sales team going and get after it. And there's a lot of ego involved in, again, trying to sell when I hadn't had to sell for years and years. And to shed the ego is a great piece of advice. I just love that, Javar. Thank you so much. Again, Javar Avery, brilliant leader, Sun and Moon Capital, investor, operator, just fantastic. Javar, thank you so much for joining us today on the Becker Private Equity Business Podcast. What a complete pleasure. Thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.